Hey guys. So I was actually talking away to Andy and I realized, oops, it's time to go live. So hopefully we're not too, we're right on time. Hi, I'm Leslie Godet and I am a mindset and emotional awareness coach for women. And how I help my clients is through helping them look at their emotional triggers, how it's making them show up, helping them shift their mindset so they can make better decisions when responding, which allows them to bring more balance, peace, and harmony into their life. And I am so happy to be going live today with you with Coach Andy.
Yes, I'm Andy. As you can see by the title, I'm also called the Midnight Coach because I stay up late for some of my clients. I generally deal with guys who have issues with control. Either they're trying to find control of their lives, or they find themselves sometimes controlling other people and don't like it. The guys that I'm helping are looking to find more peace and sanity in their lives, to become more centered and to become just generally happier with who they are. And how I do that is typically through boundaries. I help a lot of these guys find and set appropriate boundaries that allow them and the people in their lives the freedom to choose their own paths and interact how they want to interact instead of how they feel forced to. I feel a little bit dark today for some reason. My camera is not lighting me as much as I'd like, but that's okay. We'll work with that.
Of course, we'll work with it. Yeah, and I can feel. I know exactly what you say with boundaries. And it's not necessarily putting up walls, but sometimes it can feel like that if somebody you feel like they're shutting you out. It's really, and it could just be they need that personal like space where you don't bother them for a little bit and it's not you, it really is about them. And so when someone says it's not you, it's me, don't necessarily take that as a bad thing, because it could just mean I'm having a moment and I need some time by myself. And
That's right.
I think we read too much into some of these slogans that are out there, people that use saying like it's not me, it's not you, it's me, and all those types of things. And I know there is some truth to it, but I also know that a lot of the time people blow those things out of proportion, and I think it
Yes.
starts a lot of like uncomfortable conversations that turn into arguments. So
On that subject, let's get into today's argument.
yeah.
It's
Take it
not,
away.
it's not all, it's not all, it's actually, it's rarely has been an argument between you and I. We don't have these kinds of issues between you and I when we're talking on our conversations. We do share, we do talk, but guys tend to have a reputation for not talking about their stuff, whether that be about their emotions, whether that be about their plans, whether that be about their intentions or their thoughts. Guys have a reputation for not talking about things. Now, I want to address that, and you and I talked about let's get into this conversation, because there is truth to it, and there's also a myth to it. Just like what you were just saying with these common phrases. Yes, there is truth to them, and we blow them out of proportion. So let's get into this conversation. What's your
Yeah.
thoughts on it so far?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's so funny because I've been married for 25 years, and I'm still perplexed at times by my husband, because and we just actually had this conversation today, because and we've been talking about it, how he processes things, and he might take a few weeks to process, and I don't know he's processing in the background, and then all of a sudden he'll go blah, he'll blurt it out. And we actually had to have this conversation today to say, like, I get that you were able to go through your thought process, but I'm also the type of person that needs time to process things as well. So like, you might tell me something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with it, and it doesn't mean that I disagree. I just need time to think about what you said to me. And so just giving me the permission, I think for him, it's new to him, because me being a coach, like, for the last 3 years. It's new to him now to start realizing, okay, yeah, there is this whole thing around it's kind of like a boundary around letting me have the time to think about what he's had to say. And so, yeah, we had that conversation today. I said, this has been typically how we've operated our entire marriage, pretty much, where you've had time to process. You tell me what you think, and then you want me to have an answer. And I said, I actually need the time now to process because you already did that. And so, what is behind that? Do you have like an answer to that?
Well, there's, like most of the questions that come up in our community, there's layers of answers. There's a variety of answers. So first of all, what it is oftentimes we don't know we're processing in the background. We don't know that we're mulling it over and thinking it through, and we don't really realize that what we're doing is what you're asking for. A lot of the times we just think, oh, this idea came up, when actually it's been there for 3 or 4 weeks or days or months or even years in some cases, where it's been there. We just had this idea, it germinated, it grew a little bit, we ignored it for a while, it grew a little bit more, it died some, we grew, all of that processing stuff. It all happened, and we don't know that it's happening. We don't acknowledge it. A lot of us guys don't know that we actually process our emotions and our thoughts and our feelings and our reactions long before we communicate them. We don't know that we're doing that. So therefore, when we communicate them, we think it's an instantaneous thought. It feels like this has just came up for me, when actually, for most of us, it's been there a while. We just didn't notice it or didn't
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it out loud. So
Oh,
that's where a lot of that comes from. And second, a lot of guys don't feel safe to share their thoughts and feelings. A lot of guys, either from their childhood or past relationships, or even in their current relationships. I know I have been in relationships in the past where if I shared my feelings, I was often attacked for those feelings. I was often judged, and ridiculed, and or had emotional consequences, yelled at, ignored, abandoned. I had all of those feelings when I shared my thoughts and feelings. So I learned not to, because the thing I wanted to do least is hurt the partner I was with. So I didn't want to share my thoughts and feelings if those thoughts and feelings would hurt my partner. So that's the other side of that. Sometimes we aren't processing in the background. Sometimes we do say what we feel, and it isn't received in a way that we feel safe doing. So sometimes that's where these thoughts come from as well. So there's two kind of scenarios. Oftentimes we do just kind of mull it over and process it and think about it for a while. And sometimes we do blurt it out. And in a lot of the cases, one of those two things is happening. And of course, there's many other scenarios that could possibly be happening too. But those are the two most common that I come up across with my clients.
well, no, that's good. But I also have like a follow up to that too, because this is often perplexed to me as well. There'll be those moments of or spaces of time where we know we have something coming up, and maybe it's not happening for like maybe 2 or 3 months. I'm the type of person that it's not so much that I'm planning for that, but it is there. Like I know things have to get done. Sometimes I've found, and I don't know if this is just his way of thinking, but all of a sudden it's almost like I feel like a switch has been turned on, and now he's in like major planning, forward motion mode. And almost, it's not that it's frantic, but then it's like now I don't get that moment of time to process the things that he's saying, because now it's like down to crunch time. Now we got to make these decisions because now I'm thinking about it, and now we got to decide what we're going to do. And it's like, whoa, hold on a second. I've been telling you about this since last month, and now all of a sudden you're ready. It's like he woke up and his timer went off, and it was like, okay, it's time for me to start planning. So that's perplexed me a little too.
Yeah, that actually, I remember doing that, being that. I remember, I can remember in different relationships where my partner will tell me, this thing's coming, or we're going to do that thing, or maybe it's a vacation, or maybe it's an event we're going to, or whatever the case may be. And oftentimes I won't have the space to, in my brain, in my feelings, in my body, to embrace that thing that far in advance. I feel the wheels turning, but I let them turn in the background, because what I'm doing right now is dealing with other things that are more pressing, that are more urgent or more immediate or more, like, why am I sitting here fighting with my wife, or why is my kids throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks? Why is my boss screaming at me? These kinds of things. So these events that are coming up in the future, oftentimes I would give myself space to think about those when they hit the top of the list or near the top of the list. When the stresses that I had going on had either become less important, or the stress of this thing coming up, or the urgency of this thing coming up, became important enough to supersede some of the stresses I already had. And oftentimes that was what I was going through, is I just didn't have the mental or emotional space to give it that time and space until this time when I brought it up, until it became urgent. Either because I had too much going on already, or because I had other things that were more urgent that I wanted to deal with.
And it's funny how you say that. So, and I get that, because we all have things that we consider urgent to ourselves. But one of the things that I find for me is, if I'm talking about it like a month earlier, because because next month we're traveling, and so maybe I might have been talking about something like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, or 6 weeks earlier. I almost feel like it becomes a feeling of nagging. And I don't necessarily want to come across like that, but then it also feels then that I'm not being heard, because
Right.
I understand what you're saying. Like, you didn't might not have had the emotional space or the mental, like the energy to deal with it at that time. But I think it's like, how do we kind of come out to a solution that kind of that meets both needs of the man and the woman? Like, she's asking, or vice versa, it could be him too, and she could be the one that waits till last minute. Like, how do we come to that agreement where it becomes less of an expectation, like, I expect you to answer me, I expect you to have the answers, I expect you to go along the same path that I am when I'm ready, not and because that's the expectation that he has, like, wait for me when I'm ready, and she's like, well, I'm ready now to talk about it. So how do we like come to in the middle to like agree, okay, like, this is, can because if men aren't talking, then they're not really necessarily like saying, hey, I don't have the space, like, mentally right now, I just don't feel the energy to talk about this. And so, and being able to say that in a way that doesn't feel like that they're ignoring or disrespecting their partner. And so, like, that, because for me, it has to work both ways. It can't be like, oh, well, he has this thing about him, which my husband and I, we've talked about many times. It's like, you need now, especially today, we had this conversation. It was really a good conversation, but it's you have to understand that I now need time to process what you're telling me, because you're coming at me and I'm feeling like you're telling me I must have an answer right now, whereas, like, I haven't had time to process like you have. And like you said, that doesn't necessarily mean that he understood that he was really processing it all. I know him, though, he is that way, but it could be that maybe months ago he might have started processing it, but then it became that quick, urgent, I'm processing it more quickly now in the last couple of weeks. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. And so now this is what I want you to understand, without allowing me that time. And so we had, like I said, we had this conversation. He says, yeah, I get where you're coming from. And we're able to have that. But a lot of people don't. They don't have that open communication. So how do we figure that out to help other people in the same, predicament?
So I think the key to the solution is helping to understand each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is having some compassion for each other, really wanting, first of all, if we don't want to communicate, then why the hell are we together? So let's
Yeah.
just go on the assumption that we do want to communicate, that the desire on both sides is there to communicate. We just have
Mm-hmm.
different methods of doing so. So when my my partners would bring things forward to me, weeks in advance, months in advance, whatever, when they were planning things out over the long term and really, making a solid plan. I heard every word and I heard every plan and I watched every evolution and I considered them in my considerations, in my thought processing. I did process them. What I didn't do is acknowledge that I was doing that.
Gotcha.
So what it could be important for the guys to do in that case, or if it's the women doing this, is to acknowledge. I acknowledge that you're saying these things. I don't have the space to respond to you at this time, but I am acknowledging and taking in the information you're giving me, the things that you're saying, the plans that you're making. I'm including those in my processing, and when I can, I'll try and share what my thoughts are when I have the space to do so.
Okay.
I think that would be something for us guys to do, to acknowledge that we're doing that to our partners directly, to the people we're interacting with as part of our communication, because most of the time we do take that in. A lot of the time it feels like you're nagging us. A lot of the time it feels like we're not listening when we usually are. A lot of the times we do hear and care about and really want what you have to say. We just don't necessarily have the mental space to process it at the same pace that you do, in the same way that you do. And I think that's important to allow for that we do allow for different ways of processing things. I think all of us want that. So I think what us guys could do to take responsibility for our part of that is to acknowledge, yeah, actually, I don't process the way you do. I don't even know how I process. But I do hear what you're saying. I understand what your point is. I validate and value your input. I'd like some time to be able to process how I do, and when I can, I'll bring my thoughts forth to you.
Yeah, and then that makes sense too. And I think it's not just on the man's side either, because I think women also need to understand that we're both different. We both might be saying the same thing or wanting the same outcome, but we process things differently. And being open to hearing that, because some women are not. They're not open to allowing their partner to have that moment of, I wouldn't say it's weakness or anything, but I would say it's more a vulnerable moment, saying, look, I'm feeling like low energy, or I'm going through some stuff right now. I need time to process those types of things. And I think, like my husband and I, we had a conversation a few days ago, and we talked about being open and vulnerable. And when there were some things that were happening on the news, and he got emotional about it. And I said, I think that's great. And he goes, and he did actually look to me for like it was okay for him to be this human. And I said to him, like, you don't have to ask permission from me to be human. And that's part of it.
But we do. But we do.
And I know. And that's where change has to happen, because we have to allow ourselves, again, the women have to allow men to be human and allow and express how they feel, even if they don't agree, and vice versa, and have that so that men do feel comfortable talking. And we do have some comments too that are coming in. So
good.
Yeah, I mean, it's and one of the things. So like just reading just one of the comments. It says, like, where we come from was not easy. Men were hunters. And I know, I get that, because way back when, and it's not even that long ago, still, even when you think about in the last 100 to 200 years, men and women's roles are still similar in that men and women, they have the family and the dynamics, as the women do a lot more of the nurturing than the men. But now you've got two income household a lot of the time, or maybe you have single family homes, and that's because they're not communicating with each other. But way back, men were considered, they had to be the provider. We had this conversation last week where men may not have felt comfortable with their significant other making more money than them. And so there was that whole like, well, I can't provide for you and I don't feel comfortable that you make more than I do. So I feel like I'm not meeting the standard of what a man is supposed to be. And so and women were considered the homemaker. So you had the children, you raised the family, you took care of the kids, and you took care of the man when he would come home from work. He'd have his dinner ready. You would, it was just like all about, women were all about nurturing, men were all about providing. And now it's like, it's really, really unfortunate. I don't know if it's unfortunate, but it just seems that the conversations that people are having more of, instead of like looking at the root of it, is they're talking more about how men are disconnecting from relationships instead of like looking at, well, why is the communication not there? When you have a conversation with someone, typically you're not talking to yourself, you're talking to another person. So why is that conversation not showing up in your relationship the way you want it to? And that is because we've talked about this before. I don't think a lot of the time that there's really good listening going on. I think there's more of listening to respond instead of listening to hear and understand. And I think that's something that really needs to change so that you can actually start having relationships where you feel comfortable to disagree even, but at least you're hearing each other out and hearing what the other person has to say, right? So.
Yeah, I agree. It is a conversation that we can change. It is an evolution we can create. We can make these changes in this, in our own lives, in our own relationships, because it is more than just genetics. It's choice. One of the things that I find difficult in a lot of my clients' relationships, a lot of the relationships I used to have, is it's difficult to feel safe to bring our emotions forward. And I don't think that's a man or a woman thing. I think it's difficult. See, we do have our brains are designed to protect us from damage. All of our brains are designed to protect us from damage. So that when we're talking about feeling safe to bring our emotions up, when we're talking about the idea of sharing and communicating and talking with each other and really having those heart-to-heart conversations, that comes from being allowed, being safe. Us guys do have to ask permission, because there's two messages we get. And that's one, we want to hear your feelings. And two, we don't want them if they're anger. And we get those messages. And if my anger is not safe, then where can the rest of my emotions be safe? Right? How can my emotions be safe if one of them isn't? Right? And so a lot of the times what it is we just need to have permission to share whatever it is. An emotion that isn't safe for guys to share is anger, but a thought that isn't safe for a guy to share to a woman is sexual attraction. I can't share with a woman that I'm attracted to her without causing some sort of a dynamic shift in the relationship. Now, these are things that aren't safe for guys to share. So if we're going to have honest, vulnerable communication, there needs to be safety in those communications. There needs to be safety in the things that we share. We need to be okay to share the things that we do. Women used to not be okay to cry for their man, in front of their man. It used to be not okay, and in many cases it still isn't okay for a woman to cry when she's with her husband or with her boyfriend. It's changing in some areas now, but it isn't in many others. That's another emotion that's not safe. If we want to have legitimate, honest communication, it has to be safe. We have to feel like we are allowed to feel and share whatever feelings we have, as long as those feelings don't come across as an attack.
Yeah, and I agree with that too, because I think it's not, I don't know if I can just pick out certain emotions. I would think just being emotional isn't safe, because when you share any type of emotion, whether it's and even sharing your thoughts, like if you can't be open and honest with what you're thinking and what you're feeling, again, taking that time out to really listen to what the other person has to say, and listening to understand their point of view, because sometimes if sometimes it actually could be agreeing with you. It's just the way the person goes about telling you. So if you take the time to really just let them speak, even if it takes them a while to get to the point, you allow them to do it, you might actually have that conversation that you actually wanted in the first place. It just took them a little longer to get there. And so, yeah, no, and I was going through this article. I was actually trying to see, like, some people have written about this. Some people have written saying exactly what you were saying, that they are afraid to speak. One of the we have, like, as I said, one of the comments here was about not wanting to appear weak, and that is one of the comments here. They also said they don't want to appear a loser. And they don't want to be rejected. We've talked about rejection. That's a big thing, being rejected for actually showing emotion, showing that you actually can talk. And maybe also it could be that, like women as in general, we can go and have these conversations heart to hearts with our girlfriends, and talk about how we're really feeling, the things that we're going through. Maybe have a good cry. I don't know what that's like for men in a group setting. Is it more surface level or do you go? Are you only going deep in those moments where you are feeling like no one else is listening? So it's just like me and, say, Coach Andy. I can call you, like you say, you're the midnight coach, and so you do speak with a lot of guys in the wee hours of the morning. Is that when it feels more safe, because nobody's around to actually witness them having a vulnerable moment?
Yes and no. Yes, it's
Okay.
safe. That's when it's safe. So there's two factors in the midnight coach. One, it is the middle of the night, so there's the wife, the kids, the other people are usually gone,
Hmm.
and the they're usually drinking.
Okay.
So alcohol allows them to pull down those barriers that are stopping their emotions.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why I chose to stay up in the middle of the night, so that when these guys are drinking and can pull down their barriers, we can actually start talking about their emotions, so that when we get to the weekly scheduled calls, I can bring up some of the things that they talked about when they were drinking,
Hmm.
when they were under the influence, and we can actually bring up some of those emotions that they couldn't bring up on their own, but they want to address. That's why they call me when they're drunk. They want to address these things. They just don't know how to do it when they're sober. So they're asking for help in the only way they know how to. So I listen to them. I don't coach them in the middle of the night, but I do listen to them, and I'm present for them. And then we bring those conversations up during our weekly scheduled meetings. And sometimes they're able to deal with them, and sometimes they're not. So these conversations do happen around men, with other men, in groups of men. They're rarer, I think, than what they are for women, but they do happen.
Hmm.
And there's still a strong percentage of guys who feel that if they're vulnerable around other people, they will have a cost for that, a cost they're not willing to pay, whether that is being abandoned, being rejected, being left, being thought of as weak, whatever the consequences are. Each guy has a different fear that triggers, and it's those fears that are causing a lot of these guys to shut up. I Lots of guys will say, I need to have someone in my life. I need to be loved. It's a need. It's not just a desire or a want. It's a need. It's a driving need. And if I share my emotions and she takes that love away from me, I'll never share my emotions again. For some guys, that's sex, actually. For a lot of guys, and it's common knowledge that a lot of guys want sex. What's not common knowledge is that lots of women do too, but we don't know how to communicate that.
Mm-hmm.
I was married to someone who liked it, but we couldn't get together on it because we couldn't figure out how to communicate heart to heart. We couldn't figure out how to make each other safe, allow each other to share the heart portion and be safe doing so. One of the things that we often have trouble in our relationships with is learning how to listen to somebody else's emotions. What most of us do in relationships, as you pointed out earlier, we listen to respond. We listen to for the triggers. We're honestly listening to seeing what triggers us. We're listening to the conversation to see what is the danger. What is the portion of this conversation that's going to cause harm? What's going to make things worse? What's going to cause abandonment? What's going to trigger my biggest fears? And we listen for those things. And as soon as something comes up that might, we jump on that. We really connect to that. That's our brain, our genetics in our brain that's designed to find the dangers. We don't have saber-toothed tigers chasing us around anymore. We're not being tromped upon by mammoths anymore. So our brains are looking for danger in a much farther out range now. They're looking for danger in the emotional range. They're looking for danger in the potential, maybe someday kind of a danger range. Our brains are now are not designed, but they're now looking for danger in ways that danger isn't as directly obvious. We're using our reason to find danger where an instinct wouldn't necessarily find it. Mm-hmm. So when we're in conversation, we are often looking for the thing that's going to cause my biggest fear to come true, whether that's abandonment or being weak or whatever that happens to be. So one of the things that we can do to change that is by taking care of our triggers. We can nurture our triggers and heal our triggers and get help with our triggers so that we can show up in these conversations looking for connection, looking for ways to be together. We're looking for ways to support each other, looking for ways that we are in the same boat together, going the same direction. And instead of looking for the thing that she or he says next that's going to hurt most, we can, if we heal our triggers and start working on those triggers, we can start looking at the thing that he or she says that I love the most.
Yeah, and it's fun, and it's not funny, but it's amazing that you touched on that, because really a lot of what we think, it comes from our beliefs and how those formed when we were younger. All of our experiences have molded us into and developed us, and how our thought processes are just from the things that we've experienced. And then there's also, and I talk a lot about this with my ladies in my group, is about there's that whole generational cultural influence, because you have those beliefs passed down to you, and then you also are watching how other people in your life, in your world, whether it's peers, or whether it's like siblings, however, your family members, how they react around things, and you pick up on that and you bring all of those things with you. And so now, and you might have, and not even realize it, you might have had that where your family member, because again, this isn't just something that happened overnight. This has been going on for a long time, because you look at when they say the divorce rate is extremely high, that is because I feel like the communication, and I really feel truly that the communication happens, it has to happen in order for you to stay together and for things to work out. And if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, but you have to learn to communicate in a way to keep you together, or at least civil enough to actually hear each other. And I think what happens is that, I know from my own personal experience, I didn't have a model to model what a marriage would look like. My mom was a single mom, so I didn't see what a healthy relationship looked like until I met my husband, whose parents had been married 60 years before his mom passed. But that didn't mean that it was perfect. but they found a way through their communication to work through all of those things that maybe they didn't agree on all the time, but they found a way to make it work. And a lot of time, I think, is that it just comes down to you either want to or you don't. It's just a decision. So I don't know how do we can talk about like the things that you as a woman, what a woman would need to do or what a man would need to do, but I feel that it just comes down to choice. What do you want? If you are looking for a lasting relationship, then you have to ask yourself, what's my commitment to doing this, to going all in and making sure that I show up the way if I'm not so much expect, but if I want this type of relationship, what am I willing to give to get that? How am I willing to show up? And I think a lot of the time people go into, like, I've noticed a lot of people, I've known a lot of people that have gone into a marriage thinking we've been together for so long, it's time to get married. And like 3 months later, they're in Splitsville, or they were high school sweethearts. Then they plan their marriage after 10 years of after high school, they're out of college and all of that, and then they get married, and then 3 months later they're separated, and then they're moving on and they're married to someone else. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that at some point it really just comes down to a choice of like making the decision. What is it that I want? What am I willing to give the other person so that I can have the things that I want, so that they can have the things that they want? Because it really is about that. It's about, we can't just look at it from a one-sided point of view, like what's going to make me happy in a relationship, because there's two people in a relationship. And so it's like, what are you willing to commit to? And so, that's like one of the things.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. That's exactly. I do believe that being in a relationship is a choice. I had a person ask on Facebook there a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was only a week ago. They asked, what's the difference between loving someone and being in love? And it's a very telling question, because a lot of the times people associate love with this warm, mushy feeling when we meet somebody new that we're finally attracted to, and and we love them. We just are so much in love with them. We have things in common. We go to the same movies. We hang out with the same friends. We're just all the same people, and that's what happens in high school oftentimes, or college. And then 10 years later we get married and we realize that actually some of those things that aren't so surface, some of those deeper things, we don't even have in common. We don't even know about ourselves. Right? So that's where we get to make the choice of, do I actually want to be in this relationship? And if I don't, why am I wasting my time and their time and all of our emotions and energy and all this damage we're doing to each other if I don't want to be here? Mm-hmm. And if I do want to be here, it's not about that person changing. It's not about that person being good enough. It's not about that person earning my love. If I'm going to choose to be here, I get to make the choice to do loving actions. I get to make the choice to be a loving person. I get to make the choice to suppress my animal instincts to look for danger in every corner and become a compassionate, loving human being that I want to be in a relationship, that I want my partner to be in a relationship. If I want to have a long-standing relationship, the choice comes in those hard times when they did something I don't like. Mm-hmm. The choice comes in those difficult moments when I can choose to do something they're not going to like. The choice, we get to make those choices. Now, I'm not suggesting that we always have to be angels and always have to be perfect, but I do suggest that we open up the communication, that we talk, that we share, and that we talk about our emotions, we talk about our mistakes, we talk about anything we can think of. Mm-hmm. And another aspect that I wanted to bring up too is, I believe one of the most important things about guys not talking about their stuff is sometimes he's just not talking to you. Sometimes a guy is talking to his buddies. Sometimes a guy is talking to his coworkers. Sometimes a guy is talking to his, his gamer buddies, his gamer friends. Sometimes he'll be. I can't remember how many times I've heard somebody, a girlfriend, say, "I heard you playing online with your buddies, and you said this thing and this thing and this thing. You've never said that to me." But why does he have to say everything to you? Sometimes we need to process our emotions and our thoughts with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
We can't rely on one person. And you might not have heard some of the thoughts that I've had because I felt more appropriate to share them somewhere else. And if that's not allowed in our relationship, if I'm not allowed to share my thoughts and feelings with other people, then we're doomed. If I have to share everything with you for privacy, I don't want everybody knowing my dirt, I don't want to air my dirty laundry, those kinds of expressions. If we don't want to do that, then how can I, as a man, process my emotions when I don't feel safe with some of them around you?
Yeah,
Right?
and
Sometimes
actually,
we're not talking simply because there's other people we're talking to. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but here's a quick question that I have for you on that, because somebody I know had this happen. This was quite a few years ago, but I remember just this very topic being, and I wasn't a coach at the time. I really wasn't in this space, but it was the husband was sharing it with another female that wasn't romantic. So it was just a friend. But I think the reason, and this kind of goes back to what you said, that men can't really say how they feel around a woman, like to be, I'm interested in you, or I find you attractive, because I think what I've heard from other men saying is that men and women can't be friends because there's always that sexual attraction. And so that's why I think there's that whole thing where she got really upset with him because she felt, I don't know if it was some sense of betrayal, him having a conversation with another female who just was a friend of them both, but there was this whole, the feelings were hurt. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are around that, because you might have female friends, like if you're in a relationship with someone and you have a female friend that you feel really comfortable talking to, how would you handle that? Because that, I think, I mean, now I would probably be able to go back and help. But back then I was like kind of a loss for words, because back then you're like, oh my gosh, like, why is he doing that? That's not right. He should be talking to you. And so I think that's where it comes from. Like, why are you talking to other people? Why aren't you talking to me? See, you and I can say this is, we're good on this. But a lot of people don't feel that they're feeling comfortable, their person talking to someone else. Like my husband right now is talking to one of our neighbors here at the Airbnb, who I'm like, I've been saying to myself, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that this person is here. His name is Dean, and he's like amazing because he's been going through some stuff. He's helping him. And I'm like, yes, because I can't help him. And I'm so excited for it. But other people might say, well, why can't he talk to you? And I'm like, well, I'm okay that he can talk to someone else, because if that person provides him with the clarity that he needs to move on through the things that he's going through, I'm all for it. But so in the respect of the romantic part that kind of came into play, I don't know if it was jealousy or just the feelings of emotions were hurt because he was reaching out to a female. What would you say to that?
First of all, if men and women can't be friends, then you and I need to stop doing this channel right away, because obviously that's crossing the boundary right off the bat. Obviously, guys and girls can be friends. We can manage this, interdynamic that happens between men and women. We can manage that, and even in those occasions when there is some attraction, that doesn't mean anything's going to get pursued. It doesn't mean anybody's going to want that. There is a difference between the choices we make and the feelings that we have, right? And I've had, as a matter of fact, a couple of my professional relationships that I've got through the coaching company that I coach through, there's a couple of ladies in there that I do feel an attraction for. I'm still very professional with them. I haven't pursued any of that, and I don't intend to. And I'm single, so I probably could if I chose to. Mm-hmm. So we can be friends, guys and girls. we can manage those relationships. Again, it's about the choices we make. And second of all, us guys do need to be able to go to other people. I'm sure women do too. I'm sure you talk to ladies about things, or maybe other friends, men or women, about things that you don't talk to your husband about, or maybe you do talk to him, but you still talk to somebody else to further process it. There are things that we do, there are conversations that we have that aren't exclusively between our spouse and ourselves, or our partner and ourselves. Now, sure, there are plenty of conversations that probably should stay between the two of us, but not all conversations should. And I don't think, and I think a lot of the conversations that we want to keep private are the ones that are dangerous to keep private.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the ones about jealousy, a lot of the ones about love, a lot of the ones about attraction, a lot of those conversations are better shared with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those conversations are better shared with somebody we trust in other ways. Just because I trust somebody else with this conversation doesn't mean I trust them more than you.
Right.
Just because I trust somebody else with this particular subject or that particular piece of my heart doesn't mean I trust them more than you. It just means I trust them with this little piece of my heart, this little corner of my thoughts. But I trust my spouse with 80 or 90%.
Yeah. But I don't know if that you don't trust, and I don't know if it's that you don't trust sharing that with your spouse, but I think it's hard sometimes when you're trying to share something with your spouse or significant other that you don't want the emotion from them to come into the conversation. And so that's why it sometimes feels better to go outside of the relationship and talk to someone else who has no emotional investment, because you're not going to get that emotional response. And I think that's where it comes into play, because that's what I'm finding is there are times, sure, if I'm like, whatever we're going through, I might share it with a very, very close friend and say, like, what would you do, to get your feedback? Because I know there's no emotional investment on that side of the table when we're talking. There's no judgment or criticism either. It's just listening and what do you want? What do you want to talk about? Am I giving you feedback? We have those boundaries in place. But when it comes to the relationship and you're trying to have those conversations, all of a sudden, and we've talked about this, the emotions will get into it. And so now, not only do you have to try to decipher the meaning of the words, now you've got to try to decipher the meaning of the emotion behind the words, right? Or you ignore the emotion behind the words and you're only hearing the words, or you're only hearing the emotion, because you kind of get sidetracked or you get thrown off. It gets thrown off. Like those conversations where you start talking about, as an example, can you put your dish in the dishwasher, and then the woman walks into the kitchen and finds it on the sink, and the dishwasher is like 2 feet away, and then the conversation goes like, oh, why don't you ever do that? And then you get the words like you always or you never. Those phrases come into play, and then all of a sudden it gets right, and then it always gets blown out of proportion. You never do this, you never do that, you don't appreciate me, or you don't respect me. It gets blown out of proportion from just a simple, can you take your cup and put it in the dishwasher? Now, I've heard someone say this. The reason why he didn't put it in the dishwasher was because he wanted to make sure that he did it right. And he didn't know if he was supposed to do something with it before putting it in there. And so there's that whole thing too, right? There's the unspoken word behind the action that you don't, because there's no, we don't have that conversation. We don't feel comfortable enough to like just listen, like ask a question before you attack the action, right? Yes. Because maybe what you're thinking is completely different. It's off course. And so it throws these conversations that could be just simple conversations into blown up arguments. And so then you get completely off course to what you really were talking about. And so, yeah, it's like, it's crazy. I mean, it is welcome to relationships. But again, it's just, have I decided? What am I committing to? what I've committed to. Marriage isn't easy, and it's a commitment, and it's a commitment that you have to decide. Like, I know a lot of people get afraid of committing to that because they say, oh, that paper, it scares the crap out of them because you sign on the dotted line and you feel like you're a prisoner. And it's like, it shouldn't feel like that. But a lot of people automatically go there. So, there's that another conversation we probably could have around marriage too. But yeah,
Yes, there is.
I was just curious what your thoughts were on that. But it is interesting how, like, how the feelings get involved and how I feel. And I'm with you on this. I agree. I love the fact that my husband has a complete stranger that we've only known for maybe 3 weeks now, 3, 4 weeks, that he's felt comfortable to talk to about some of the stuff he's been feeling, and he's been helping. And I'm like, yes, thank you. I have no problem with that because you can read a person, right? Their intentions. He's a really nice guy, and I have no problem with that. But yeah, it's just like that's I mean, I was just curious about. It must obviously be just not maybe comfortable in the relationship enough to feel like the trust is there of sharing it with someone else. Maybe
Yeah,
I don't know.
and I agree. I think it could be a trust issue. So if I'm worried that my spouse or partner is sharing something with somebody else, that isn't the problem she has. It's my feeling, and I'm having that feeling because of a judgment I've made,
Yeah.
because of a thought that I've had. So
Mhm.
I can examine the thought that I've had to decide or to figure out where that feeling is coming from. Those feelings don't just happen because of somebody doing something. Nobody else can make us feel a thing. Nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Our feelings always come from a thought or a judgment or an idea, a meaning that we've given something. If my spouse is talking to another person, man or woman, about something intimate in our relationship, and I have a problem with that, that isn't because she's talking to him or her. It's because I have a problem with it. And I can examine that. Now, I
Mhm.
can decide if I want to be right and can keep that problem, or if I
Mhm.
want to change that and get rid of the problem. But I can't change her actions. I can't change her feelings. I can't change what she's doing. And if I try to, that's where the control, that's where the conflict, that's where the issues come up in relationships.
Yeah.
She's not to blame for my feelings. He's not to blame for my feelings.
Right. Well, we're coming close to the hour. I know that as I was, our conversation is really about like why men won't talk, and it's really not like it's not an attack on men. I think it's more
Right.
of just understanding the reasons why maybe men won't share openly with how they're feeling, and it's not necessarily that it's because they don't want to. It's feeling in a safe, feeling safe to do it
Yes.
because we've been living in this world for so long where it's been again was very still very new, even though women have been working, providing for themselves. They're very independent, that and it's just being it's only been like a really short, and when you think about it, it's only really been a short amount of time considering how long men and women have been in the role of being in this relationships, and it's only been like a really minuscule amount of time where women have been able to be more independent and going out and doing their own thing, and having their own career and still have a relationship and have the children and all of that stuff, like dreaming for the bigger picture. And so it's like, how do one of my questions is, we can talk about this. We both understand how we feel in on this topic, but how can we help the people that are listening to this, watching this? How can we like impart some kind of not so much advice, but maybe just an idea of how, if they're having these difficulties with opening up to each other, like what could they do? Like what would be a really great thing for them to do that would be at least one step in the right direction?
So I think the first thing to do is to really try and get into the head of there are two of us in the conversation. Instead of trying to listen for how he or she is causing me damage, listen instead of trying to listen to respond, instead of trying to listen for the triggers, instead of trying to hear the attacks, remember that that person isn't always trying to attack, and sometimes they are through the damage that they have felt. But even when they are attacking, they're attacking from the damage they have felt. So if we get into these conversations understanding that there are two people with vulnerable hearts who are easily damaged, and I don't want to damage that person, and if I have and they respond by attacking me, they also don't want to damage me. They only damage in a response to a defense. They do so in response to a perceived attack. If we can enter these conversations from a place of trying to connect, and when the anger and attacks show up, we choose instead either to disband the attacks or disband the conversation until the attacks can be disbanded. Like, just enter the conversation trying to connect with another person, the way you and I enter these conversations, so that we can understand. Like, we didn't come into this, we didn't do any pre-planning for this conversation. We didn't talk about this one at all. We both had some understanding of what the problem is, but not because we discussed it ever. We didn't pre-plan this, and this means that we were able to show how we can disassemble a conversation, how we can really come at it from two completely different directions and come to a similar result.
Yeah, right? No, I love that.
That's
I
all
love that. Yeah, and I think too is just making that choice. Like, what do you really want? Like you were saying, is this a relationship what you want? Like, do you really want to be with this person? And then what are you willing to do to nurture this relationship? Because it is about nurturing. It still is about showing the other person that you care in your words, in your actions. Sometimes the other person, because maybe you have had conflict for some time, but you still feel like you want this relationship to work, it's going to take a little time because the other person might have to deal with some trust issues around, previous actions, previous words. And it's like, if this is really what you want, have that conversation saying, this is what I want to do. I really want to try. I really want this to work out. And this is what I'm prepared to do. And if we can go into these relationships with each other without that expectation, the way we expect things, only to show up as agreed that we're going to do our best to be the best person that we can, to nurture that relationship, to show up the way we said we are going to, and treating the other person the way we would hope to be treated, because they say the way you want to be treated is to treat other people that way. And I think that will help to heal. But again, I feel like as well, is also making that choice. So if this is what you want, then the first thing is just to decide, because that's really kind of like everything. You make a choice, you make a decision, and then you decide what you're going to do. And then you have the conversation. This is what I'd like to do. And that's a beginning step, and it's possible. I've seen, I know of some people's marriages that were turned around simply by taking those baby steps, making the decision to go all in for each other, and then building really great, strong relationships. But it's first making the decision to do that. So, yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly our secret is to make the choice.
Yeah.
Make the choice, and once you've made the choice, go into the conversation, every interaction, with the intention that both of you are there to make it better.
Yeah.
Both of you are there to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah. So I can't believe how much the time just flew by. But this has been a really great conversation. I love having these conversations. I feel like, there's so much to unpack from just this conversation itself. And I was thinking of other things definitely we even touched on that we can bring in as a separate conversation that would be really great. And yeah, and then just we'll go
We'll
back to the
never run short of stuff to talk about.
yeah, and we appreciate you guys coming on. And if you like this, make sure that you click on the subscribe. Like it if you do, but click on the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future ones that we're going to be going live. I believe. I will actually go and check the calendar so I'm right this time because last time I said the last Thursday. I believe the next time we are going live will be Thursday, May 13th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which will be 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, correct?
4 p.m. Mountain Standard.
Mountain Time? Okay, Mountain Time. I'm so like not really with
I think
when it comes to
it'd
that.
be easier for us. I think it'd be easier for us to do Eastern and Pacific because
Yeah.
that's where most of the people are
So
anyway.
3 o'clock. So 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I, however, will be coming from Atlantic Standard Time, so I will be an extra hour ahead. So I will be on at 7, but that's okay. It's still within the time, which I love. But it's been really fun talking with you about this. Really super excited. We'll go back to the comments and answer any questions. And but we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
until then, I guess we'll see you again. Andy, don't go anywhere. So we will see you guys again soon. I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Bye for now.
Perfect. Thank you.